Hi, this is January Jones, and I play Betty Draper.
Hi, I'm Rosemarie DeWitt, and I play Midge Daniels.
And this is my favorite part of the show.
It really is. It's awesome.
I think Rich Sommer was supposed to kill himself, but didn't, because Matt Weiner ended up liking him a lot.
Oh, really?
Which works out for him.
This I can't believe people actually eat or ate.
It's disgusting. I remember watching this waiter guy do it. There's a real guy who still does this, so he's an expert. He wasn't an actor. I don't remember where this was. It was downtown somewhere. It was a real place, but it was
It's the Prince, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
It was like in
Koreatown.
Yeah, it's a Koreatown. It was like an Asian
Like a Korean restaurant.
Korean restaurant. Yeah.
With some crazy, like, colonial decor.
Yeah. Amazing lamps. I
Yeah.
remember wanting to steal some of those lamps.
And John and Talia are married in real life, which is
It was the first
cool.
time they've acted together.
Seriously?
Yeah, they were really nervous.
They're so good together. Was this one of the first scenes you guys shot after we took that year off after the pilot?
I don't know if it was. Yeah, you know what? I think it was. I think we shot in order a little bit. And this was the first scene that I had done, yeah, for a year. I was very nervous to play Betty again because I really wasn't in the pilot. I didn't really know who she was.
Right.
So I was like figuring it out as I went along. I auditioned for the show. I auditioned for Peggy twice, and then they obviously decided on Elisabeth Moss, and Matt wanted to bring me in for the wife role, but there wasn't really I mean, my character was in the pilot for like 3 seconds, and I don't think weren't really going to elaborate on the Betty character, but he changed his mind.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow, because he turned into one of the coolest characters, I think, on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I lucked out. Yeah, he wrote a couple scenes for me to audition. Like like in a day, and I came in and read them, and that was it. And then those audition scenes that he wrote ended up being like episode 4.
Wow.
But Matt had said something that he said that I don't know what it was, but he said that there was something about me that wasn't believable as innocent, which I don't know how to take that exactly, but
that you're a slut.
Yeah, I look like a whore. I'm happy with doing Betty. It ended up being the better fit, and it's just interesting. At this point, she's real shaky and nervous and hasn't been in therapy yet, so I didn't know how far to play the crazy card.
How much do you love that dress you're wearing?
I know.
So pretty.
That was one of the first days I had to wear a girdle, though. It was very uncomfortable. I remember taking very shallow breaths and almost passing out a couple of times. You get used to it, though. Your character didn't have
no girdles. I was letting it all hang out.
The pony bra. I love my hair on the show. It's harder to deal with with the day-to-day basis now, though. I constantly look like I'm in 1960.
Where did you guys shoot this?
On the stage. Oh, we were like rocking the car with wood planks and flashing lights at us. Not to ruin it for everyone, but we weren't driving. I remember saying that line and not knowing what that meant at all. Lobster kinglets. Still don't. There's a lot of debate on the shaky hands for this episode. Like how I should shake them. Like they're shaky, or they should be clenched, or they should be... What was the appropriate something? It was a huge debate. We had to go back and reshoot close-ups on the hands. I think it was more of a tingling sensation, which caused my hands to clench and shake a little.
John Hamm's the luckiest actor on TV. He used to work with all these great women.
That's good for his ego.
Mm. Did you guys just switch sides?
Yeah.
You did, right?
He's sleeping on my side.
Okay. That's a gorgeous shot right there.
I hate the herbal cigarettes. They burn. I just do the natural, though, I think. I don't think I was ever offered a flavor.
God, look at that shake. I love watching her walk on this
It's
show.
the best. I barely ever see anyone else besides John and the kids and Francine. It's neat.
It's your life.
I know.
I never see
It's
anyone.
method acting. No, it's neat to see all the other cast members, though, when we do crossover. It's like, what have you guys been doing? What have you been doing? When we see the episode, it's like, whoa, that's so cool.
Well, it's sort of thrilling to watch the show for that reason, because you
Yeah.
really become a fan, you know, because you live in the little world that you live in, and then you get to see everyone's work. I don't, you know, like when I'm waiting sometimes to do the stuff in my apartment, I would pop over and see what they were up to. I mean, they have a lot of fun, and I feel like they're given a lot of freedom, the boys, to sort of...
Yeah, I think they're the air of camaraderie between them is kind of encouraged, so there's a lot of joking around.
Yeah.
Oh, no, come on. Come on, Kenny. Knock it off. Just pretend it's prom night. You can be the girl. Stop! I gaze right. I close your eyes.
Mr. Draper, I was buzzing you. Mr. Cooper is waiting?
So Roger mentioned this Nixon thing.
Yeah, he mentioned it.
I think the Don character is very attracted to. I know he's married to Betty, but he's attracted to these like strong, independent women that are. It's very interesting that both Maggie or Midge and Maggie's character, Rachel. I think he's sexually attracted to the people, the women that he respects, and I don't know if he respects Betty.
And it seems like he takes these women on in his life for whatever reason, because of whatever he's running away from at the moment.
Yeah.
You know, so when he was running away from his past, then he found Betty, and then what he starts to try to merge with what he's moving towards next. I think Matt one time talked about, I don't know what all the other women were, but Midge was his id, you know, like different parts of his sort of psyche. And
No toodaloo.
Secretary 1, copywriter 0. It wasn't that. I bring my lunch, at least until after the first of the month.
I love these two.
That sandwich is making me sad.
Excuse me?
He wants to know, are you taken, you captive, or merely browsing?
She's browsing, and like most of us.
When you read the scripts or something and you read something that may be now politically incorrect, I don't know when you're hearing it or when you're hearing it as an actor, you're not really allowed to. I don't allow myself to I kind of think it's funny. I don't know. We've come a long way in a short amount of time. But in the same vein, I think that men and women still say those snide remarks just behind your back. It's not like, hey, sweetie, you looking good or whatever.
It was, I found, really liberating, to sort of be so truthful. And I still love, one of my favorite moments in the series is when one of the kids comes up to you with a dry cleaning bag over her head, because I just remember growing up that way, and and your parents smoking. It was just a freer, less fearful time in a way where people really had that sense of their whole lives ahead of them and anything is possible. Yeah. And then there's all this dark underbelly, at work. But how much fun to drink your martini and just there's this freedom that is infectious. I felt like among the characters, and it sort of seeps into your life. I love this scene too.
That outfit.
It's awesome. You really pull these clothes off. You make them work.
Do I? I don't know.
Yes, you do.
I don't think so. Janie has a lot of fun with these clothes.
So interesting how threatening this woman is.
Helen. Scene.
No, Helen.
Oh, yes, because she's so independent
she's
and single.
divorced. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right, that these independent women don't exist in this part of the world.
Oh no,
we see them everywhere else around Dawn, but not here. And how threatening.
They're in the city. If they're in the burbs, then they're a big threat.
Yeah. Oh, here it comes. One of my favorite moments. And I love that you're not worried about it. You just don't want your clothes to be messed up. It's not the suffocation issue at all.
It's the clothes.
It's the clothes.
These first few episodes of the episodes are still smoking without filters. Ugh.
Oh, and then you switched?
Well, filters I think were invented in 1960, so I was convinced props that Betty was a very fashionable woman.
I remember being able to climb around the car like this.
I do too.
It's fun.
There's Helen Bishop pushing a box on her own. It's making me shaky.
I think it's wild that this is happening to you when Don's with his mistress.
Yeah.
Like it looks, yeah. But you got the handshake down.
I think that was our first or second Bobby.
Oh, really?
I've had like 3 different sons. Three different Bobbies.
This is the bad wig scene, which I love that they threw a line in about it.
Oh yeah, you had all that.
I didn't want to cut my hair, so I became wig girl.
Yeah. Which is kind of fun though. Maybe not for you, but
Oh no,
I
it's
love that
totally
you
fun.
had a different like.
We just didn't have it down to a science quite yet, because this was episode 2. But yeah, I don't have the bras on or the girdles. Thank God. I love Matt Weiner for letting me throw the TV out the window.
Did you really get to do that?
Yeah, but I mean, you know, and
Drop a
2
couple feet.
onto a mat. What do you call it?
Pad.
Pad, yeah.
I like that robe. Oh yeah, fish sticks.
Consider places.
All the brown. It's an amazing place. Spent a lot of time there.
Did she know that he has a mistress at this point? Do you feel like she
I don't
knew?
know. I don't know if she lets herself think that until maybe towards the end of the season. She may.
I just mean like in a sense, you know?
No, I don't know. She may. Yeah, I don't think she allows herself to think bad things. Everything's kind of perfect. That's why I think that all this is kind of simmered and boiled up and is boiling up into this handshaking and the need for therapy and
It's interesting though, because Don loves her so much.
You
know?
think so?
Yeah. I mean, despite all.
Like a kid, maybe. I don't know if he.
Well, there was a way that men, I
Yeah.
feel like, of this generation had control over their, they could tell their wives, you're not going to work.
Yeah.
I want you home with the kids. Or, like they really had all the say. And then I guess they, in some cases, could also engage in extracurricular activities. And they're able to compartmentalize it. That doesn't seem to be what's eating Dawn alive. It's certainly not the women. But he's threatened.
Yeah, I don't know. He doesn't want her to see a therapist at this point, I don't think.
Yeah.
She may become too knowledgeable.
Independent.
Yes. I think there's a line coming up where where it's been kind of fashionable lately. I don't know if I say it or someone else says it, maybe Roger, about his daughter going to, and maybe Francine says it. Even when I'm around the house in my pajamas, I have my little gold shoes and my hair is done, or at least in curlers.
There's something fabulous about it, though. Like when I was looking at the Polaroids, when they would try out the wigs, I was like, oh my God, I look like my mom, from. And when I look back on the pictures of my parents, they looked so good. They were so put together, their hair and their clothes, their outfits, And now it's like when we all have kids, they're going to be like, ew, what were you wearing? You just get like ripped up jeans and tank tops.
A sign of independence that women don't do that. Don't put that much care into it anymore. I mean, we do occasionally, but not on day to day.
But it feels grueling, like when you have to get ready for something. We did that instead of going to the gym. We get to that later in the series, right? There's something that seems like it's going to be an exercise tool.
Even better.
That's what we need to get Betty.
God, yeah.
It's funny, this set, when you go on, it looks like grandma's, and then when you watch it on TV, it's beautiful. Like the headboard and stuff. But that room always creeps me out.
Yeah,
when
it
I
does.
walk on the set.
We have 2 stages. Stage 2 is the office, all the offices and some other sets, and then stage 4 is all the Dr. Wayne, the home set, and so casually.
Yeah.
The boys are really good friends too, offset.
An engineering marvel. Right guard. It works in my suit or yours.
We'll punch the yellow of the moon so it pops behind it.
I read a book that Matt suggested I think it was called Memoirs of a Beatnik, and it was one of the few pieces of beatnik literature actually written by a woman. And she was, just having an inordinate amount of sex with tons of different people. Part of me, I was really like plugged into, God, I'm such a prude. Like in the first 6 pages, she takes some guy home that she meets in the village, sleeps with him a couple times. He leaves and goes to work, and a friend of his comes by, and then she starts having sex with him. And I'm like, oh my God, we've gotten so repressed. I was sort of like exhilarated and horrified if that's what he thought Midge, that she was going
That was Midge.
to be like. And I feel like there was some of that in there.
Like Samantha
It didn't
from
quite
Sex
go
and
that
the
far.
City or something.
Yeah.
I read most of The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan and Revolutionary Road. But I was always a big fan of the literature of that time and movies of that time. So I didn't really over research anything. It was kind of all on the page. It's been very educational just watching the show and reading the scripts.
It's so exciting, even this, just to see like the birth of advertising. Like the very beginnings of things, like whether it's the beginnings of sexual exploration or the beginnings of how to sell deodorant. And it's interesting. I remember Matt talking about how this was the year that both Valium and the birth control pill came out, which is really interesting because this episode is a lot about the women on the show and how this poor girl survives in this place, a man's world. It's interesting. I never thought this until this moment. Like Betty knows her place in the world. She's a housewife and whatnot. And Midge is saying what her place is in the world. And Peggy, God, she really has to figure it out. And like all these men come on to her, and it must just be so confusing.
Yeah.
For these women who want to express themselves, in mainstream society, because we're just about to get into the beats have sort of come into play, and then they'll become hippies later on. But it's really interesting.
She sees that Joan obviously knows her place in at least the office and the world, but she doesn't want that. So what's the other option? There's none.
Well, and they all try to tell her. The women try to tell her who to be here.
Yeah.
And how to dress and how to behave, and she still has, this inner compass that's guiding her in a different direction. But it gets her into trouble.
Ends up working for her in the end, though.
Yeah, true. Well, it depends. I guess it depends on what you...
Coop is going to want a carbon with your hand-picked team for Nixon on it, and I warn you right now, it includes Pete Campbell.
Peggy's being thrust into, all these things, and you're getting all your info from like Francine and the little bit.
But it's weird though, because then as the season goes on, you find out that Betty's been educated. She went to Bryn Mawr. She traveled to Europe. She's done all these things, and she chose to be the housewife, and chose her place in life, as much as Dawn has, And then she just figures out that she's not happy.
But then what's interesting. Like, you watch these guys talk, and there's such a level of, like, they're trying to have an honest conversation, but in a way it's so much less honest than the conversation you have with Francine.
Yeah, horribly dishonest.
These walls that are up. God, that's a line.
He has some great ones.
I know. We do. I mean, it's true, right? It's amazing to hear a lot of this now in 2008, you know. I love the way the writers also weave all this. Like, you know, your kids were watching People Are Funny. I asked Dawn just a little while ago, have you ever seen this thing, People Are Funny? Like, the way they're all interconnected, even though they're living these seemingly very different lives. And when you get the world. I love the way you played that moment. You know, like there would have been the temptation to gush, but it's like it's what you're used to. You know, like this is what your husband does for you. This is the perk of being the housewife.
Her mother was a big part of her ideals and how she, you know, thinks women should be. I think her mom was kind of a harsh woman and not very nice. She talks about her a lot, though. It's horrible that she thinks that killing kids is better than Sally living with a scar.
Must be hard for him when he sort of choose the perfect woman, and then she starts coming
Unraveling.
undone. Yeah. I like this line. I think she's interested in experiencing life on her own terms in another way, and she doesn't quite know how to do that because later in the season she'll make some different choices that are, I was sort of surprised at. one of the general ideas floating around is that that's very like bourgeois is to want those things, and that's the cool thing about working on a TV show. Like these characters develop the way life develops, like day by day.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you have a film script where you kind of build an arc from beginning to end. It's sort of you get a new script and you're like, oh, we're going there.
Yeah,
with
it's
these
very
guys.
exciting to read the script the couple days before you shoot it.
But it does play around with all those ideas of possession and ownership and
You
this
belong with
episode.
someone else.
Mm-hmm. I don't think Midge wants to be owned by a man, so she's fighting it tooth and nail until maybe she finds someone who that's not their goal. I mean, she can see it. Don kind of in the TV, like, where'd you get the TV? Where, and she's not going to have that.
Yeah, it's a very cool character. Like she knows what's expected of her at that time, so she just fights against everything that she thinks she should, or what society thinks she should.
Sure. Which is different than actually having it figured out when you're fighting against it.
Right.
But
You're just rebelling in general.
Mm-hmm. Watching this, it's interesting who's threatened by who.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't everyone think so threatened?
What's fortunate for us is that we have had a lot of the same directors. We had Tim like 4 times, Alan 3 times, I think, and then Phil Abraham, our DP, directed 1 episode. So it's nice to have familiar faces, and they're all amazing. You get comfortable with someone, you're able to talk to them. I always found it weird in TV that you have a lot of different directors, and when you have a question about the character, there's not really anyone to ask besides, we ask Matt, of course, but you know your character better than anyone, so. And it's obviously must be strange for them to come into. It's an environment where everybody.
I love this scene too.
These scenes are grueling. They're like 6-minute monologues. Because the doctor never says a word.
Don't you love that you get to take so much time on this show?
Yeah, that's what worried me a lot was the TV. I know that it's my first series, and I knew that it moves so fast. And I love, as an actor, I love the moments in between, and we were able to have that on this show, which is great. Sometimes it says a lot more.
Was this in the script that you were going to take your watch off, or did you just do it? Do you remember?
No. I don't know if it was in the script, but we decided on set.
Because I kind of loved it. It's so interesting that it's the thing Dawn just gave you. And as you're sitting here talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, Matt wanted me to
aside.
just take, yeah. Like, it can't be comfortable to talk about myself with the watch on.
Yeah, yeah.
This is when I still had the press-on nails and not the acrylics.
I could tell by the way you take out the cigarette.
And I had to do this first part where I light the cigarette so many times because every time I would light the lighter, my thumbnail would go flying across the room. So freaking frustrating. Yeah, they got shorter and shorter. I was like, can't do much with them.
It's interesting. I'm talking about this guy, Roy, who's just nobody to me.
Yeah.
And then he shows up, like episode 6 or something. And he's my boyfriend, But who knows when you just.
Yeah. I think that's great, though.
God, all I do is kiss your husband, huh?
More than I do. Somebody's got to. Those are great earrings.
Yeah, those are fun. All the jewelry is great. God, he's always thinking.
He thinks through everybody.
I think sometimes you want to merge with the people you want to be like, and then sometimes I think you want to merge with the very thing you're trying to get away from.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's almost a way of acting out with someone like Dawn.
Yeah.
There were moments in the series where I thought she genuinely cared about him, like in a way that she wished she could have a life with him, and then there were times where I thought it was really just a fun sort of either where she came from or daddy complex or something. And he's also just hot.
Or yeah, just like a hot fling.
Yeah, exactly. What excited me was that she was somebody who was really trying to figure out who she was, which is such an interesting place to be in life. And, like January said, actually, I think Matt and I did have some conversation about who she was and where she came from. And we decided that she came from a certain amount of money. And then all of a sudden I saw the hallway shot, like the set going. I'm like, oh, I guess she doesn't come from money anymore. Like now she lives like in a dingy building in Greenwich Village. So it's just, I think it starts to reveal itself. Like you kind of throw all those ideas out once you see the set, once you put the clothes on, and then your character starts maybe setting herself apart in that way.
Well, I think that Don represents everything that she's ever wanted in a husband. He's a brilliant businessman and provides for his family, and it's like they're all playing roles, and he plays his role very well. And the fact that she's lonely and doesn't know him very well isn't something that she's allowed to bring up. Or she chooses not to avoid confrontation.
Also, that withholding quality can be very appealing to women.
He's
all the
mysterious.
women. Yeah.
My dad, they didn't know each other very long before they got married, so she probably just figured they would get to know each other, but they just haven't. Or maybe she thinks she knows him as much as any other wife knows her husband. I don't know if she knows. I don't think she talks to her friends like that.
I don't know if people in general talk the way we talk now.
Yeah.
Back then about what they're feeling. And
you don't want to be judged by people to think you're strange.
This kills me that he calls the doctor.
I know.
He has control over every aspect of his wife's life.
Well, if it concerns him, if his wife's going nuts, it's got to, he probably doesn't, he's not doing it maliciously. He's just got to know. We were doing a Q&A in New York for the New York Times, and there's a couple of psychiatrists that were, practicing in around that time, saying that happened all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's a great episode. It's introducing all I think more so the female characters than anyone in, where we are in this show and in the world, and makes you want to see more.
And it's so great because Matt creates these really strong women, and at the same time is working things out with them, like on the screen. It's not all figured out, and he presents them. They're working it out, and the audience is working it out with them.
It's a very believable and realistic, view of women now and then.
Yeah.
So I think that's why people love the show, is that you can just relate to it on every level.